In this example, I want to go ahead and take a look at why I might use one event handling model over another. So I'm going to start with an HTML template, and I'm going to call this event handling. And I want to start with an inline event where I pass a reference to the control that's triggering the event. And this is driving me crazy with Google, so I'm just going to start up a new tab, and now it's not pulsing. So I'm going to go ahead and start with just a button, and it's going to have an on-click event handler, and it's going to trigger inline, passing in a reference to this button. Okay, and the idea is that this on-click event could be a really complicated event, and you might be tasked with something like, hey, can you modify this existing code base? I don't want you to change anything that's currently going on, so I don't want you to change this function inline where I'm passing in this. I don't want you to change any of the current functionality because I don't want it to break and maybe no one knows what that code base really does anymore. But we want you to add some new features to it. Okay, so our job is to modify this on-click event handler so that it continues to have this inline function, and we'll write the inline function here in a second, but we also want to extend it by adding some of our own code. Okay, so in order to write some of our own code, we're going to have our own script where we'll trigger this init method, and we are going to need access to this button, so I'm just going to have an ID equal to btn. Okay, and I saved this somewhere in my documents. That's not where I want that, so I'm going to remove that project folder. I'm going to save it on my desktop in a new folder called events as index.html. Okay, so here's our file. I'm going to need a JavaScript file, and it looks like I saved it just on the desktop, not in the events folder, but now it's in the events folder. I'm going to want a JavaScript file called events.js, and I'm going to need that init method. So here's my init method. Okay, and we'll deal with that. And then I'm also going to need this inline event. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and have another function, const inline, equal to a function definition. And all I'm going to do is just a simple console.log running inline event. And then what I want to do is I want to extend that method. Okay, so here's the problem with extending it. So let's say you take a job at some company and you know very little about the company and you know very little about the application that you're working on. Okay, you don't know the business rules or anything like that or how it should function. All you know is that you have to extend this function. Okay, for our example, it's pretty straightforward. All we're doing is a console.log. However, when you get to your workplace, you find that their system is really complicated and they say, don't break anything. Okay, I don't want to break anything, but I also don't know how it should be functioning in the first place. So it's really hard to say I haven't broke anything when I don't know how it should function. Okay, but that's the task that we're given. Okay, so I'm going to link up my JavaScript file. We're given that task, and again, we can see if I bring this over to a browser, we're able to see that our code is running right now. We get our inline event handler. Okay, we want to modify it. So we go over to our JavaScript code. We say, okay, yeah, we're going to have an init method. Let's go get a reference to our button. So we're going to have a variable for our button. So we get our button. And if we just say on click, here's our new method that we want to extend it with, what's going to happen is that we will have our new method and it'll work just fine. So console.log, our new method, that'll work just fine. However, you'll notice that we also got rid of our inline event handler. Okay, so that's going to be a problem for us. So instead of trying to extend it using the dot notation event handling, what we want to do is we want to use add event listener. So we want to add to the click method our new method. And here the idea is that now you'll see that we have our existing method running and our new method running, and nothing has really changed in that sense. Okay, so the dot notation that we started with on line 3, what we're really doing is we're overwriting anything that is in that onClick attribute. So we're saying our new method should be the value on the right-hand side of the equal sign. Well, we had an existing value on the right-hand side of our equal sign, and we don't want that to go away. So instead of using the dot notation to add our new event, we're going to use the W3C standard to add an event listener to get our new event. Okay, another situation that we might run into is, and the example I always give is Amazon. So Amazon has this buy it now concept, right? So if I go ahead and have an HR tag, and then I have a button with an ID equal to buy now. Okay, Amazon has this concept of buy it now. You click on an item and you make a purchase. Well, I always think a ton of stuff has to be happening on the back end of Amazon systems. So, for instance, you're going to get an email notification. You are going to somehow want to get your package. So Amazon's going to alert a warehouse. They're going to alert a shipper, a package delivery company. They're going to maybe alert their suppliers. They might alert your credit card company that you made a purchase. So all sorts of things are going on, and they're all important. So when I click on this Buy It Now button, there's a bunch of events that are getting triggered. So for instance, let's just go through a few of those. So generate a customer email. And then I might want to notify delivery company. And then I might want to notify local warehouse. Okay, so I'm just going to go with those three. Okay. And here's the way I want this to run is I want to get a reference to that Buy Now button. So here's my Amazon button. It's going to be using the query selector method, and we called that button Buy Now. Okay, so that's great. We have this Amazon button, and we want all three of these events to occur. And just to make sure that they are all occurring, we're going to call them email and delivery and warehouse. Okay, so these are the three methods that we want to trigger as a result of this button click. And what we're going to do is we're just going to use an add event listener. So we're going to take our Amazon button and we're going to add our event listener. We're adding to the click event. So we're going to generate our customer email. And then we will notify the delivery company. And then we will lastly notify the local warehouse. Okay, so we want to do all of those things with the button click, and what we'll see is that when I click on this Buy Now, you'll see all three of those things happen. Okay, so the problem with this is that when I use this add event listener method and I generate multiple event handlers for the click event, the W3C standard indicates that there is no guarantee in terms of the order that these events are going to occur. So just because I added the email first and then the delivery and then the warehouse, you can see that that's the order they're triggering. Just because they're added that way doesn't mean that that's the sequence that those events are going to get triggered. And where I can run into a problem with that is if I use a certain IE browser, it'll actually generate or trigger those events in the exact opposite order of they're added. So I can't guarantee the order that these events are going to occur, and that causes problems for me because sometimes the event handlers have dependencies. So for instance, maybe I want to notify the local warehouse and I want to allow that notification from the local warehouse to occur because maybe the warehouse sometimes comes back and says, yeah, that's great. We have the item, but it's not going to be ready for delivery for 2 days. So there's no need to notify the delivery company. So instead of having the local warehouse get notified or the delivery company get notified first, I want the warehouse to get notified first. Okay, so in theory, I could just change the order in which I add these events. Okay, and you'll notice that it works fine in Chrome. So I notify the warehouse and then I notify the delivery company. However, I'm not guaranteed for that to work. So instead, what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to have a single event handler, and that single event handler is then going to handle my events. Okay, so I'm going to take my Amazon button, and I'm going to add an event listener, which is a click event, and the event handler that I want is just a traditional function. So here's my function that's going to get executed. And in the function, what I'm going to do is I'm going to generate the customer email, and then I'm going to notify the local warehouse, and then I'm going to notify the delivery company. And you'll notice here I'm using parentheses, and the reason for it is because this click event is going to trigger this anonymous function. So the event handler is actually this anonymous function. I don't have parentheses around the anonymous function to actually invoke it. So my anonymous function gets invoked, and then I manually invoke the methods that I want in the sequence that I want. So I'm controlling the order that these event handlers are going to occur. Okay, so I go ahead and run this, and you'll see that now I can kind of dictate whichever order I want. Okay, where I run into problems, and this is a bit of a problem, is let's say I want to, let's go back to our original example. Knowing that we're eventually going to end back up where we were, I want to go back to my original example where I have a notification for email and warehouse and the delivery company. All of those occur, and all of those then take one parameter, which is the event. And I'm going to do 2 logs. I'm going to do a console.log of the email, but then I'm also going to do a log of the event.currentTarget. Okay, the control that triggered this event. And I'm doing that for each of them. So you'll notice that in each case, the Buy It Now button triggered all 3 of those things to occur. Okay, so now that's working great. Now I want to control the order. So now we're going to go back to this sequenced solution where I have an anonymous function, and then inside the anonymous function I trigger those 3 different methods. And now I end up having a problem. And the reason I have a problem is because the event that was triggered as a result of the button click was this event here, this event that I defined that ends up, so defined starting on line 14, ending on line 18. That's the event that got triggered. That's the event that gets the parameter passed into it, event. Okay, so I get the event passed in, and now if I actually want this to work properly, I have to forward this event on to all of those methods that I'm explicitly calling. Because it's not going to be done as a result of event handling, these methods, 15, 16, and 17, are not getting triggered as the result of an event, the user clicking on the button. They're getting triggered as a result of me explicitly invoking them. The event that got triggered as a result of the button click is this event that started on line 14 and ended on line 18. So if my methods generate customer email, notify local warehouse, notify delivery company still need that event handler, I need to forward it on and pass it through. Okay, so I'm going to save my JavaScript, I go back over to my browser, and now you'll notice that I'm in control of the sequence of events, and I'm also in control of the fact that I can tell which control actually triggered my event. Okay? So those are some gotchas with event handling that you're going to end up seeing. So for the most part, in terms of what event handling model do I want to use for my projects, for new development, most of the time it's add event listener. There are some gotchas with add event listener. Specifically, if I'm adding more than one event, like I did here, then I usually will set up an anonymous function so that I can control the sequence that those events actually fire. And then the other issue that I have is when I do that, when I do control the sequence that those events are occurring, that I have to explicitly pass along that event object so that I can get the current target in each of those different event handlers. Okay, so the add event listener is pretty straightforward, but there are some gotchas with it that we do have to deal with.